All right, hello ladies and gentlemen. Today I will be going through the Unit 3 Day 8 notes. This section will kind of cover solving systems of equations, which we have been working on for quite some time now with the whole elimination. And if you look at the next page, you'll see substitution for this page. So no graphing, especially when you have three variables, because that takes us into like the three-dimension and stuff like that. So you don't want to get into graphing, solving with three variables, but substitution and elimination is what we're going to be focusing on today. So again, noticing that this has three variables rather than our normal just x and y. This is going to have that third variable in there. Now I broke it down kind of step by step for you. That way while you're doing a practice problem, you could always kind of refer back to and say, hey, what step am I on? What should I be doing right now? I will stress to you that one of the most important things about this notes today is going to be the fact that you stay extremely organized. And I know for some of you that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but the more organized you are, the more this will make sense. So following the steps and walking you through the steps, the first thing is to get ready, because this is not, a nice, short, easy process. It does take some time and it takes organization. It does have very similar steps as our normal elimination, but it's important to kind of get yourself prepared because these are longer problems. I would expect on a test or quiz that you would only have like one or two of these. You're not going to get a lot of them because they do take time to solve. So let's get into the next step. The next step says line up equations 1 and 2. Use the rule of elimination, because that's the method we're using right now, to eliminate one of the variables. So let's say I come down here to example number 1. We're going to call this equation number 1, equation 2, equation 3. Now the directions say to line up equations 1 and 2 and eliminate one of the variables. So let's say that we're looking at the first two equations, 1 and 2. Which variable do you want to eliminate? I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to eliminate the x's. Okay? So in order to eliminate the x's, I'm going to need to take this second problem and multiply it by a -4. If I multiply this by a -4, this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to kind of write it off to the side. The first one stays the same, 4x plus 2y minus z equals 1. And then for the second one, please remember that it does get distributed to everything right there. So if I go ahead and distribute that, that's going to give me and I can write it kind of over here, -4x plus 12y minus 8z equals -56. Now, just like normal elimination from previous, you can go ahead and add these together. Remember, it is always addition. And you're going to go ahead and have the x's cancel out. That leaves you with a 14y minus 9z equals -55. Now, I'll point out to you at this point that doing this process of elimination did not give me a definitive answer. I still do not know what x is. So here's where the organization comes in play, is I would call this one of our new equations. And we're going to see that word come up later, one of our new equations. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little star next to that and save that for a little bit later. Step number 3 says line up equations 2 and 3. Use the rule of elimination to eliminate, and here's the important part, the same variable. Okay? So if I look at equations 2 and 3 down here, I need to be eliminating x. Again, it has to be the same variable or else this will not work. So if I look at my x's, okay, you can ignore the 4 now because that was from the previous problem. If you want to erase that, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get rid of that because that was for the previous section. I'm looking at equations 2 and 3 and saying that I want to eliminate the x's. Well, thankfully, looking at this, they're already going to eliminate. So I can go ahead and add these together. That makes my x's eliminate. And what am I going to be left with? I'm going to be left with a -2y, because I added those together, plus I have 2z and a 1z gives me 3z equals 13. This is, again, here's your organization. This is going to be one of your new equations. Okay? And you'll see in step 4 that it brings up that word new equation, right? So it says write the two new equations. based on the results from steps 2 and 3, line them up. At this point, it should only have two variables. So I look at my new equations. That's a y and a z. A y and a z. I only have two variables. Now, use elimination again to solve for one of the variables. So let's line these two up. I'm going to go ahead and switch colors here. I'm going to line them up. That's 14y. Let me scoot down a little bit. Okay, so I have 14y minus 9z equals negative 55. That was my first new equation. And then my second equation was a negative 2y plus 3z equals 13. Now here's my two equations, and if you look back up to step 4 says use elimination again to eliminate a variable. So let me come down here and say, okay, let me look at my equations. I want to eliminate a variable. So which variable do I want to eliminate? Well, that's a good question. I could try to eliminate the y's or the z's. It's totally up to you at this point. I'm going to go ahead and go for the y's. I kind of like to get rid of those ones out in front. So that means I'm going to have to take this problem and multiply it by 7. So what is that going to give me? I'm going to keep the first equation, 4y minus 9z equals negative 55. And my second equation is going to become a negative 14, because remember that was a negative 2, plus 21z equals, and then on the other side, I should get 91. Now, just like any other elimination problem, you're going to go ahead and add these together. So these eliminate and give me 0. Over here, I should get a 12z equals 36. And then I can finally solve for z, and I get that z equals 3. Now, I would in some way, shape, or form kind of highlight that or remember that because, you know, that's going to be part of your answer. So keeping in mind that z equals 3. Okay. Then, if we go back up to the steps above, where did we leave off? We left off at problem number 5. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can make this a little bit clearer. It's a little bit clearer. Sorry, I was just trying to make it clearer for you guys. So we're back up at step number 5. It says plug in to value. Oh, okay. Plug in this value that you found. You're going to plug it back in to one of your new equations. Sorry, I skipped to step number 5. I didn't finish reading step 4. So step 4 says, you know, solve for one variable. That's what we did. It says plug that value back into one of the new equations. And that's very important that you plug it into a new equation. If you try to plug it into one of the OGs, we'll say one of these 3, it's still not going to be enough to give you an answer because all you have is z. You still don't know what x and y are. So let's pick one of these new equations. It doesn't really matter to me, and I'm going to go ahead and grab a different color. So if I have z as 3, let's say I use this one because this one's nice and close. I'm going to have 2y plus 3z equals 13. But now I know what z is, so I can come over here and say 2y plus 3 times z equals 13. And I get 2y plus 9 equals 13. If I keep working through this one, you're going to get negative 2y equals 4 and y equals negative 2. So now what I have, putting it all together, is I have my y value and my z value. So this takes me on to the step that I had kind of jumped ahead to earlier, step number 5. It says plug these two values found in step 4 back into one of the original equations. So let's do that to solve for the third variable. So let's do that. So let me go back and say, okay, pick any of the 3 equations, whichever one you feel like working with. I'm going to go ahead for this last one. So this last equation was a negative x plus y plus z equals negative 1. Well, I now know what y is, and I now know what z is. So let's come down and plug them in. I have negative x plus my y, which is negative 2, plus my z, which is 3. That gives me negative x plus 1 equals negative 1. Negative x equals negative 2. And I get x equals 2. So now what I have is my 3 variables, and like I said, if you keep it nice and organized, you know, especially even using colors, if you have colors on your laptop, it just makes it a lot easier to kind of keep everything straight. So what do I have in the end is I have 3 of my variables. Those are the 3 variables I wanted. Now if you read the directions, if you go back up, it says your equation or your answer should kind of be in this x comma y comma z. So if I take that, my x, if I come down here, my x was 2, my y was negative 2, and my z was 3. So as far as my answer goes, there's my answer. Okay, so it is a little bit of a process, but like I said, the more you stay organized, the better off you'll be. So what I would like you to try to do now is to try to do number 2 on your own. This will require you to pause the video and take a moment and try this on your own. Okay, so again, pause the video. I would start out by picking equations 1 and 2 and doing elimination, same process as over here. Then go on to problems 2 and 3 and eliminate. But remember, you have to eliminate the same variable. So if you choose, for example, some people might look at this and say, oh, I'm going to try to choose to eliminate z. If you eliminate z here, you have to eliminate z here. So just be mindful of that when you're picking what variable you want to choose to eliminate. I would also recommend starring your new equations. I know it seems silly, but for organization purposes, it's really nice to star these equations because these are the 2 new equations you're going to be working with. Once you actually get to these starred equations, then it's the exact same process that we've been doing in all the other classes because it's just 2 variables. It's like having an x and a y and an x and a y. That process is still the same, going through, eliminating something, getting one variable, and plugging it back in to find the other, right? That kind of from the purple yarn to the green is all what we've been doing. But it's just this beginning step of finding these 2 new equations that's something new. So again, feel free to pause the video and go ahead and try example 2. When you get through example 2, I'm going to tell you right now, your answer should be 2, 1, 2. So again, that's your x, your y, and your z. All right. So be mindful of that. Those are your variables. That's your answer. If you did not get that as your answer, go back, check your work again, or go to the answer key under Content Library and see if you can work out your mistake. Then, step number 6, in case you're wondering, step number 6 is that you're all done. So good pat on your back. You finished this long process. Now, substitution is on the next page. Substitution seems like it's going to be easier because it's only like 4 listed steps. But the thing is, it's a lot of the steps from elimination. So there's not really much of a difference with substitution than there is elimination. And this one, you don't really need to know both methods. So if you like one better than the other, that's fine. You can use either method. So let's start working through this one. It says solve one equation for one of the variables. So in other words, get one of the variables alone. So you can pick any of the equations. It doesn't really matter which one. So take a look at all the different equations and say which one's going to be easiest. Maybe I pick this first one and I'm going to get x by itself. So that's going to be x equals, I would add the 2y over, so that's positive 2. I'd subtract the z, and then I still have that minus 4. So I got one of the variables alone. Then step number 2 says substitute that variable into the other equations. So I'm going to take this value of x and plug it in here, and I'm also going to plug it in down here. Okay. Now here's again, you need to stay very, very organized for this. So I'm going to do the first equation, okay, or we'll call this equation 2 because that's what we did on the first one. So we're going to go to equation 2, and I'm going to have negative 4, but I'm going to plug in x, so that's 2y minus z minus 4, and then continue onwards, that's plus y minus 2z equals 1. Do a little bit of math, that's negative 8y plus 4z plus 16 plus y minus 2z equals 1. And if I go ahead and solve this, combining like terms and so forth, I'm going to get a negative 7y plus 2z equals, and I would bring that 16 over to the 1 so that it's on the same side as the 1, and that's going to give me negative 15. Now, if you remember on the previous page, I said always star when you get those new equations. That's one of my new equations. It's an equation that only has 2 variables in it, which is a good sign. Okay? We're always looking to get down to those 2 variables because we already know how to work with 2 variables. So build off the skills you already know. Then the next one, I'm going to go ahead and plug in x. So I have 2 times x, but remember to substitute it in. That's 2y minus z minus 4 plus, and then continue onward, right up here, continue with this. So that's 2y minus z equals 10. That's 4y minus 2z minus 8 plus 2y minus z equals 10. And I get my 6y minus 3z equals 18. And again, you'll notice I'm starring this problem because that's, again, one of my new equations. Now, going back up top here, onto step number 3, this one's going to be simplify these 2 equations so you get 2 new equations. So here's our new equations. We've kind of already done that step, and we starred them. These equations should only involve 2 variables. That's exactly what I did. Then step 4 says, follow steps 4, 5, and 6 from the elimination method. Okay. So really, I mean, you could do substitution again if you wanted to take one of these and solve for a variable, but let's just keep rolling with what we just did in the last problem, which was lining them up. So if I line these new equations up, that's negative 7y plus 2z equals negative 15. That's my first equation, and then I get my second equation, 6y minus 3z equals 18. And let's think about that elimination and saying, you know, what can I eliminate? It's probably going to be best to try to eliminate the z's. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate my z's by multiplying this by 3 and multiplying this by 2. Okay, so what does that give me? That gives me a negative 21y plus 6z equals negative 45. This one should give me a 12y minus 6z equals 36. Add these together, the z's go away. I'll put the little addition symbol there. And I should get a negative 9y equals negative 9. Therefore, y equals 1. And again, very similar in the last problem, I'm going to go ahead and highlight that and say, yay, I found one of my variables already. Now, following the steps from the previous page, once we had that, we then chose to plug it back into one of the new equations. So pick one. Doesn't end up really mattering which one you choose to pick to plug it in. I'm going to go with this second one here, and I'm going to have, I'm going to write it over here maybe. So I'm going to have 6y minus 3z equals 18. But now my y value is 1. So if I plug in 1, that's 6 minus 3z equals 18. Do a little bit of math, and you get z equals negative 4. So where am I at now? I am at having 2 of my 3 variables and going on to step 6. So remember, if you go back to the previous page, what is step 6? Remember, we're just following the steps from the previous page. Step 6 says take these 2 values that you just found down here, boom, boom, and plug them into one of your OG problems, one of your original problems. So it doesn't really matter which one. I'm actually going to go ahead and plug it into here because why not? I'm trying to find x. I might as well plug it into here. So that's x equals 2 times y, but my y was 1, so I went ahead and plugged in 1, minus z, but z was negative 4, so I'm going to plug in negative 4, and then minus that 4 on the end. If I simplify this, I'm going to get 2. Negative, negative becomes positive, and finish adding those together, and you get x equals 2. So if I go ahead and highlight that one as well, now what do I have? I have 3 variables, which means I can go writing my answer, and that's x, comma, y, comma, z. Please make sure you're writing it in the correct order. It should always be x, y, z. If you mix up these orders, and for some reason, you know, maybe you wrote 1, 2, negative 4, that means that your x is 1. And that's not correct. So please be mindful of which ones you're plugging in. Now, very similar to the last problem, I'm going to let you pause the video and try this example all on your own. Okay, so example number 2, try that one on your own. Once you finish that, and I'm just kind of stalling because I'm imagining you haven't paused it yet, but once you pause it and once you solve this, you should get an answer of 4, 1, 5. And I will say that if you got that wrong, a reminder, go back to the answer key, see if you can figure it out. Your homework tonight is right there at the bottom of the page. So please do this homework over the weekend. You have, those 2 whole days. These are long problems, so take your time with it. But that's why I made it over the weekend, because it's a long process. All right? And if you have any questions, please feel free to save them for Monday, and I will answer all of your questions when I get back.